In The Naked Anabaptist by Stuart Murray, only a few sentences are written about the issue of creation care. Is the issue of stewardship of the earth and of the animals going to be brought forward into the Anabaptist movement in a significant way? And how will Woodland Hills deal with this issue?
Well, yeah, that was a weakness, I think, in the Naked Anabaptist. But I don't know as much about the Anabaptists as Murray does, so I'm not going to critique him on that point. I will say that as I've spoken to various Anabaptist groups, I've felt at least a shared, maybe not passion, but an agreement about the salvation and the gospel and what Jesus did on the cross is for all of creation. There's been that sentiment. That's part of their tradition. I don't think it has been, in the Western world anyways, as much a part of their tradition as it needs to be, and I think some folks see that. They, like everyone else in the West, have been co-opted by the Industrial Revolution and all the other things in Western culture that has conditioned our thinking to be just consumers of the environment rather than caretakers of the environment. And they've been affected by that as much as anybody else. And so you haven't had that as a strong motif. I am hoping that we at Woodland Hills continue to grow in that conviction and continue to influence others in that conviction. And one of the things we're looking at as we're looking at what tribe to belong to is not only how would they bless us and help us, but how is God leading us to somehow pour into them and influence them? It's one of the criteria we're looking at. And this is one area where I would hope that as we continue to grow on this, we can maybe begin to influence others in caring for this. It is certainly a growing passion of mine, and I see it all over the place in Scripture, as I shared a couple weeks ago from the pulpit. That it's shalom for the whole of creation. But it hasn't been as strong as it needs to be, I don't think, in the contemporary Anabaptist.
Yeah, I'd reiterate, it is a really important piece of our theology here at Woodland Hills. Our discipleship and formation pastor, Kevin Callaghan's here somewhere. And I know in his model of discipleship, what he's designed is what we call the 4 directions of love. Loving God, loving others, loving self, and loving creation. Like it's one of the key dimensions of our model of discipleship here. And one we need to grow in. So I absolutely affirm that. I guess, probably everything Greg said I would agree with, though I would want to say that the Anabaptist tradition itself does have some resources here, I think, that are important to notice. There was a book written, I think, about 10 years ago now, titled something like Creation and the Environment, an Anabaptist Perspective, something like that. A group of Anabaptists wrote about this topic, and they pointed these things out. They said that this hasn't been as dominant a theme in Anabaptist theology as it could be, but let's remember, every time we say about anything in Anabaptist theology, like where is it, let's remember that the Anabaptists, unlike most other groups of Protestants, rarely had a moment in history where they could sit back, kick back, and write theology. They were usually running for their lives. And so there's a lot of theological stuff you could say about Anabaptist tradition that hasn't been thoroughly investigated. In this particular book you saw a group of Anabaptists who took this very seriously and pointed out that many Anabaptists have been very agrarian in their way of living, that the Amish, for example, are very tied to the land. So there's always been this important connection between Anabaptism and the land, and that provides a basis for the working out of a theology of creation care that would be very in line with their way of seeing and living. So I think it's possible.
I mentioned a couple weeks ago in the pulpit that the Hutterites in particular they were known for their care of their farm animals and referred to them as part of the family. And that there was a theology that circulated among the early Anabaptists that abused animals will stand in judgment over their abusers. Because how you use power that you have over those who are vulnerable to your power was the criteria for judgment. It's really an interesting and convicting perspective. And I forgot about this, but there's a book that's going to be coming out here very soon by Trip York. He's the editor. Trip York or York Trip? Trip York, yeah. Called, I think it's Good News for All Creation. And it's a number of essays from Anabaptists on this particular topic, and showing how, coming out of the Anabaptist tradition, there is this care, is called a care for all creation.